We are listening and that we want to be good partners to them.
Tonight, pro-oil protesters shut down Calgary streets outside of Justin Trudeau's meeting with oil producers.
Many of our young people are becoming hopeless.
Stark realizations come to the forefront at the Quebec Inquiry in Kuujjuaq.
As a student, you worry about your own marks and you worry about, am I going to pass this test? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? For me, it's twofold.
And a family that studies nursing together stays together. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. We begin tonight with the continuing testimony in northern Quebec. Health and social services and the lack thereof were the focus of the third day of hearings in the Quebec Inquiry in Kuujjuaq. Tom Fenario is covering the inquiry for us.
This year in Nunavik, many young lives have been lost to suicide. In Pevernatuck alone, the community of less than 1,800 has seen 11 people take their own lives.
I was trying to think of why are we doing this? Of course, the answers will be very complex, but I know one of the reasons many of our young people are becoming hopeless is because many of them are victims of sexual abuse.
On Monday, former Kuujjuaq Mayor Tunu Napartuk testified that his biggest regret during his time in office was not addressing what he says is the taboo subject of sexual abuse.
And our resources from health and social services need to be more established so that we can provide better support to the victims of sexual abuse.
Say I do. I do.
Wednesday's hearings heard testimony from several members of Nunavik Health and Social Service departments. As a part of their suicide prevention strategy, they're working on getting a fly-in sexual abuse intervention team off the ground. But before they can do that, there are hurdles to clear.
We are not attracting and recruiting and retaining Inuit very well within our sector because we're so limited by the restrictions.
According to their testimony, one of the biggest restrictions is Bill 21. After coming into effect in 2012, the provincial bill emphasizes strict education and training criteria for mental health workers, but fails to recognize cultural and language skills that are important to helping Inuit.
And if you are not part of an order and if you don't have the degree, like most of our Inuit workers are, you cannot do specific acts in services.
Nunavik has a dropout rate of 74%, and those who do go on to higher education must go south. As a result, non-Inuit who don't speak Inuktitut and are more expensive due to travel costs keep getting hired instead. But according to Gray, there is optimism that change is afoot. Quebec is working on a new health bill, and she's confident that they'll be able to push for compromise.
We're hoping that within the bill that we can address these issues where we have to recognize an Inuk's ability to give services, not just because they have a degree.
Gray is the first to admit that any delay is frustrating. As the only Inuit region in Canada with a rising suicide rate, in Nunavik, every day counts.
We are in 2018 and we are still sending our people away from their homes and their families to get the proper care.
If you or anyone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts, you can call one of the numbers listed on the screen. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Kuujjuaq, Quebec.
To Alberta now, where Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, was in Calgary to meet with oil industry leaders. There's a huge price discount on Canadian crude, something that cost the economy approximately $80 million a day. And that stirred anger in Canada's oil-rich West. Trudeau was asked what his message to oil industry leaders would be. Here's what he told reporters.
We are listening and that we want to be good partners to them, that we want to ensure that the thousands upon thousands of Albertans and indeed people right across the country who rely on this sector for jobs can be reassured about how the industry is doing and how it's moving forward in the right way, that we are there.
Meanwhile, there was a large protest in Calgary by people who say Trudeau has to do more to get oil flowing out of the province.
March This is serious. People need jobs.
Nearly 2,000 pro-oil protesters shut down parts of Calgary's downtown as they rallied outside a hotel where Trudeau spoke with leaders of the energy industry. Many Albertans say they are frustrated by the cancellation of approved pipelines and the delay of the Trans Mountain expansion. Back in the House of Commons this afternoon, Trudeau's Liberal government was slammed over its financial update. The NDP was hot under the collar over its spending for corporations while not keeping its promise on a national housing strategy. Here's some of that exchange.
A year ago, the National Housing Strategy was announced, but the housing crisis in Canada deepens every day. There is still no sign of an Indigenous housing strategy. As we approach another brutal Canadian winter, shelters will be overflowing and more people will be left out in the cold. The most vulnerable are being asked to wait until the next election. On National Housing Day, will this government enshrine the right to housing in legislation so everyone can have a safe, affordable place to call home?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, my mother used to say that if you want to make a point, vote NDP. If you want to make a difference, vote Liberal. And on housing, you couldn't be more correct. My mom couldn't have been more correct. Our $40 billion housing program over the next 10 years is real money building real housing right now. But on the issue of Indigenous housing, not only have we made new investments, substantial new investments, there are new programs on their way as we speak. And as it comes to the right to housing, as it says in the National Housing Strategy, we'll be legislating a rights-based framework to make sure that Canadians get the housing they need when they need it. As I said, we're making a difference, regardless of what point they're not making.
Universal Children's Day has been celebrated on November 20th for over 60 years to promote awareness and improve the well-being of children worldwide. In Quebec, this day is extended into a full early childhood week from November 18th to the 24th. Results from a recent survey on First Nations and Inuit children in Quebec was released Wednesday. Nearly 2 out of 3 Quebecers believe that First Nations and Inuit children are being discriminated against in Quebec, and 3/4 of respondents agree that Quebec should do more to support First Nations and Inuit families. Mayray Dixiwi from the First Nations of Quebec and Labrador Health and Social Services Commission says the survey highlights critical issues.
Health, education, and also housing is another one that we're identify. So housing and also housing problems. So we all know that First Nation, in many First Nation communities, housing is an issue because there's not enough houses. There's houses in poor conditions, and this is something that affect the children because they need to live in good conditions. So.
Time for a quick break, and then we'll hear from a mother who's been fighting to get her children back for more than a decade. But first, here's a preview of what's coming up right after the news.
Hello, I'm Todd Lamoran, and here's what's coming up on Nation to Nation. The political panel is unanimous in what it thinks about the Ontario Doug Ford government's decision to axe the province's children's advocate. So will the federal government step up to the plate and take over? As well, the MPs respond to the latest on the Indigenous Rights Framework Initiative. Ottawa wanted it done by next fall, but that's not likely to happen. And the House's Heritage Committee heard testimony about creating a National Indigenous Peoples Day. Witnesses don't want it on June 21st. It's all coming up right after the national news.
Here's a look at Friday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. -5 with sun for Fredericton and Halifax. -5 and snow for Happy Valley Goose Bay. 0 with snow in Cartwright. -6 in Montreal, though the sun is out. -4 with snow in Val-d'Or. +3 in Toronto. 6 above for Windsor. +5 for Sarnia and London. +6 for Thunder Bay, 4 above in Sioux Lookout. In northern Manitoba, -11 for Puckatawagan, -13 with snow in Churchill. +3 for Winnipeg, 4 above in Gimli, 2 with rain in Brandon. -3 in Saskatoon, -2 for Yorkton, -4 in North Battleford, -20 for Uranium City and Stony Rapids. Welcome back. A woman who fought for 11 years to get her kids back from Child and Family Services took to social media to document her uphill battle. Last week, part of that battle ended as she was reunited with her children. Melissa Ridgen spoke with Tamara Malcolm earlier.
Tamara, you fought a long battle and finally won. What's the first thing that you did when you and your sons were all back together?
We actually ordered pizza and we watched movies and just enjoyed our time together here at home.
So this is you. I mean, most people are familiar with the what you've been through by following on Twitter. Now that you've got the kids back, you can kind of settle into having them back home and being their mom full time with them. At what point are you going to take a look at where you can take this? Like, what needs to change for this to never happen again to another family? I know that you've said that you want to be an advocate of this change, but what specifically needs to change?
What I believe needs to change is this needs to stop happening to families. My question is, I wonder how many families this is happening to. You know, I believe it should change now. The province of Manitoba owes me and my children a formal apology.
Yeah, well, and I know that you've said that you've outlined that it's part of the secrecy and just the way that the system is set up. Can you explain to people who might not be familiar what is specifically wrong with the system that kept your kids in care for 11 years?
I find that a lot of our First Nations in general are put through so many hoops to jump through. I find that there's no support system. Back 11 years ago when I had started this, there was actually nobody there to support our family.
There's, I mean, yours isn't the only horror story, unfortunately. We've heard horror stories from parents who have had trouble getting their kids out of care once they're in that system. There's, I think the province of Manitoba now is saying that they feel that this way that the system's been set up until now, it actually incentivizes Child and Family Services Agency to keep kids in foster care. Is that something that you feel that has merit, that allegation?
I believe that they need to bring our children home. I believe that it takes a community to raise a child. It doesn't take all these different avenues of government system. Back in the day, it was our communities who took care of our own children. I believe that's where this needs to go, is they need to start listening to our First Nations and listen to our elders, because a long time ago, it was our community who took care of our kids. People within our communities knew what was best for our kids.
What do you feel that will be the challenges for you and your kids now that you're back together? I mean, we hear kids talk about what effects it has on them growing up in care. What's uphill battle, I guess, are you guys looking at right now that you have to climb over quickly?
Right now, since my boys have been returned to me, I found that it's very difficult because now I'm dealing with the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the trauma that my children have endured by a system that was created to set up to fail my family. Now I find that I'm having to take my children back and to show them the way that I was brought up by healing within our own cultural activities. That's the only way that's going to work for my kids, is to get them away from this whole other system. I find the only way that it'll work is bringing them back into ceremony, where they never had the option to have ceremony in their lives in 11 years.
And what's next for you? I mean, you obviously have the kids at home now, but you've said that you've said before that when you get those kids back, you want to advocate. How are you going to go about doing that?
Well, I still do advocate. A lot of times I read a lot of things that are going on through the media. I read a lot through the newspapers, I find a lot of parents still reach out to me and ask me on how it is that they could get their kids back. I try and encourage a lot of parents that in order to even get your kids back, you have to be in a clear frame of mind, a clear state of mind in order to even take this on. I always try and encourage that you need a book from the start. You need to write down everything that's being said, because some of the times I find that everything that you've said to them, well, not everything, most things that you say to them, they try and say that it's not even being said.
Yeah. Well, Tamara, I thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and congratulations after, a decade of a hard-fought battle. Good luck to you and your family.
Thank you so much.
Few people know what really happened during the Tyendega Mohawk Territory blockade in 2008. Even fewer know just how close the OPP came to carrying out a Dudley George-type killing. Now, APTN Investigates reporter Trina Rhodes showcases never-before-seen footage of the clashes and reveals how deep wounds in the community haven't healed over. Here's a preview of Law of the Land, Part 1.
The Mohawk, Kuujjuaq. Tyendega Mohawk Territory, April 2008.
It was always about the land, and it was to stop the development of the land, and we did that.
That sort of aggressive stance that was taken by police that, in my view, was completely unjustified.
Mohawk blockades and the police response.
Ontario may have come within a hair's breadth of another Dudley George type of killing.
Why is it important 10 years on to move this forward? It's because these issues have never been addressed.
I want the story to be told so that people realize and people know when they go out and defend the land how they can protect themselves and expect what's going to happen.
This is Tyendega Mohawk Territory in 2018.
We just crossed into the border of Deserano. One side of the road is the town of Deserano, and one side of the road is reserve.
Dan Doreen is a Mohawk land defender. Today, he's my tour guide.
All of the important part of the town is on stolen land.
Deseronto is a small town in southern Ontario.
There's a creek right here, and this is where the land claim goes to, right here.
The Mohawks filed a land claim for around 900 acres called the Culbertson Tract. Land taken unlawfully from the Mohawks in 1837. The federal government accepted the claim in 2003.
The government actually said, yes, it's 100% Mohawk land, and no, you're never going to get it back.
Looks good. Again, that airs tomorrow night right after the news. Time for another quick break, and then the story of two soon-to-be nurses who share a special bond. Here's the rest of your Friday weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. -11 and sunny for Peace River, and high level 8 below in Grand Prairie. +2 for Lethbridge with rain, 2 and snow in Medicine Hat, +1 in Calgary. 9 in Tofino and Victoria, +8 in Campbell River and Vancouver. -8 for Fort Nelson, +6 in Prince Rupert, 0 with a rain-snow mix in Prince George. -18 for Old Crow, 11 below in Mayo. In the NWT, -10 for Fort Liard and Trout Lake, 16 below for Norman Wells and Wrigley. -24 in Sax Harbor, only 1 degree warmer in Paulatuck. -28 for Repulse Bay, 31 below in Cambridge Bay, 25 below for Baker Lake, -32 in Igloolik and Tallyoak. Welcome back. It's midterm season for university students. And for those in nursing programs north of 60, that brings them one step closer to graduation. But two of those soon-to-be nurses share a special bond. Our reporter Charlotte Mort-Jacobs went to the classroom to hear their story.
Treating viruses with antibiotics. Biotics are for bacteria.
There's still a lot of cramming to do before this week's pharmacology test. Luckily for Jordan Erickson and Jody Prince, they can swap study notes because these two students are mother and daughter.
There were moments where I thought, can I really do this? This is a lot. But I mean, you push through it, and we don't really get at each other's throats too much. We kind of actually ground each other. Just gonna put it all on myself.
These fourth and final year students are completing a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing at Aurora College in Yellowknife. Sharing the classroom with your daughter has brought Jody many laughs.
Of this, one of the first days we had to sign a photo consent for school, and she wasn't allowed to sign it because she wasn't old enough to consent. So I was in her class, so she passed her form on over and I signed her consent as a parent.
Both have excelled, but there were doubts.
I think we had one instructor that said when she heard a mother and daughter were in the program that it was like, this is not going to turn out good.
It's complicated and it's stressful. It's very...
For Jordan, adjusting to the demands of a newfound career was challenging.
Just time management between going to clinical and regular everyday life. You get really tired and it's hard to do the things you enjoy because you have no time. You're exhausted all the time.
Jody says she is grateful for the experience, learning alongside her daughter, but that it comes with unique concerns.
As a student, you worry about your own marks and you worry about, am I going to pass this test? Am I going to do this? Am I going to do that? For me, it's twofold. I have to worry about, am I going to pass this test? And is she going to pass this test? Is she going to do well? Because what if she doesn't? And what if I'm here alone? Or vice versa.
As their formal education winds down, this mother and daughter duo is ready for what lies ahead.
I will just be looking forward to grad day. We have a very big grand party planned, which I think will be fun. But walking across that stage, definitely, especially getting to walk across the stage with her, I think will be a really, really good. I can't wait for it.
Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Great story. That's all the time we have for tonight. For News Anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. You can also download the APTN News app. Stick around. Todd Lamoran's next with Nation to Nation. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a good night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.